In December 2008, in the middle of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, a 70-year-old man walked into his Manhattan office and sat his two sons down. The man was Bernie Madoff. He was one of the most respected figures on Wall Street, a former chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange, a philanthropist, a trusted advisor to the wealthiest families in America. That morning, he told his sons something he had never told anyone in his life. The investment management business he had been running for over 30 years was, quote, one big lie. It was a Ponzi scheme. There were no investments. The $65 billion he claimed to be managing didn't exist. His sons turned him in to the FBI the same day. Bernie Madoff was arrested the next morning. His scheme, running for at least 17 years, possibly over 30, was the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Thousands of victims, charities destroyed, lives ruined, multiple suicides, and here is the part most people don't know. He almost got away with it. He had been investigated by the SEC multiple times. One whistleblower had warned them 5 separate times across 9 years that Madoff was a fraud. They didn't listen. Today, I'm telling the full story. How he built it, how the math actually worked, the whistleblower who tried to stop him for almost a decade, the collapse, and the brutal lessons hiding inside the largest financial fraud of our lifetimes. Welcome to Earnings Per Page. Wild money stories, honest finance history. Hit subscribe. Let's begin. First, who Bernie Madoff was. Bernie Madoff was not some shadowy character. He was the opposite. In the 1960s, he co-founded a legitimate brokerage firm. By the 1980s, his firm was helping to pioneer the electronic trading systems that became the NASDAQ. He served as the chairman of the NASDAQ exchange 3 separate times. He sat on regulatory committees. He gave to political causes. He donated millions to Jewish charities, hospitals, and universities. He was on the boards of major nonprofits. He owned homes in Manhattan, Palm Beach, Montauk, and the south of France. He looked like everything Wall Street was supposed to be: old money, quiet success, deep credibility, unimpeachable reputation. People begged to invest with him. He famously refused most of them. The exclusivity was part of the appeal. If Madoff didn't want your money, you must not be important enough. If he did accept you, you were part of an elite club. Lesson 1. How the Ponzi scheme worked. Here is the basic structure of every Ponzi scheme, including Madoff's. New investors give you money. You don't actually invest it. Instead, you use the new money to pay fake returns to existing investors. The existing investors see returns showing up in their accounts. They tell their friends. More money comes in. As long as new money flows faster than old money is withdrawn, the scheme continues forever. The math only collapses when too many people try to withdraw at the same time. Madoff's claimed returns were perfect, roughly 10 to 12% per year. Steady, consistent year after year, through bull markets and bear markets, through booms and recessions. Through 1987 and 2000 and 2002, Madoff's returns barely move. This was supposed to be his genius. His critics, and there were always quiet critics, said it was impossible. No investment strategy in legitimate markets could produce such smooth returns for so long. But year after year, his investors got their statements. The numbers always went up. Lesson 2. The whistleblower nobody believed. In 1999, a financial analyst named Markopolos was asked by his employer to replicate Madoff's investment strategy. Markopolos was a quantitative analyst, a math expert. He spent hours analyzing Madoff's published returns. Within 5 minutes, he later said, he knew the numbers were impossible. Within 4 hours, he was certain Madoff was running either a front-running scheme or a Ponzi scheme. He started reporting Madoff to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The first complaint was filed in May 2000. The SEC ignored it. He filed again in 2001. He filed again in 2005, this time with a detailed 21-page memo titled, quote, "The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud." He filed again in 2007. He filed again in 2008. 5 separate complaints. 9 years of trying. The SEC investigated multiple times. They asked Madoff questions. He charmed them. Several SEC investigators were young, inexperienced, and overawed by Madoff's stature. They didn't know how to read the financial documents he provided. They closed the investigations. Markopolos eventually became afraid for his life. He believed Madoff was so well connected that being publicly identified as the whistleblower could be dangerous. He carried a gun. He kept the names of his contacts secret. He prepared an emergency plan to flee with his family if Madoff found out who he was. He turned out to be the only person who would have prevented thousands of victims if only the SEC had listened. Lesson 3. The collapse. The 2008 financial crisis was Madoff's undoing. As markets crashed, his investors needed cash. They started requesting redemptions in unprecedented amounts. In a normal investment fund, this would be inconvenient but manageable. In a Ponzi scheme, it is catastrophic. By December 2008, Madoff was facing $7 billion in redemption requests against accounts that, in his fake records, held over $65 billion. But the actual cash didn't exist. There were no investments. There were only forged trading records. The math finally broke. On December 9, 2008, Madoff went home and confessed to his wife and sons. On December 10th, his sons reported him to federal authorities. On December 11th, FBI agents arrived at his Manhattan apartment. He confessed immediately. The fraud was over. Lesson 4. The human cost. Madoff's victim list was staggering. Thousands of individuals. Many had given Madoff their entire life savings. Major charities. Yeshiva University lost over $100 million. Hadassah, a Jewish women's charity, lost $90 million. The Pekauer Foundation, which had been one of the largest philanthropic supporters of medical research in America, was destroyed completely. Steven Spielberg's charitable foundation lost millions. Kevin Bacon lost his retirement savings. Elie Wiesel's Foundation for Humanity was nearly wiped out. Beyond the financial damage, there was tragedy. Madoff's older son Mark, who turned his father into the FBI, killed himself on December 11, 2010, exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. Madoff's younger son Andrew died of cancer in 2014, having said publicly that the stress of the fraud destroyed his health. At least 2 other Madoff investors killed themselves after losing everything. Lesson 5. The trial and Madoff's life in prison. Bernie Madoff was charged with 11 federal crimes. He pleaded guilty in March 2009. He was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison, the maximum possible. He served at a federal prison in Butner, North Carolina. He gave occasional interviews from prison. In them, he often blamed his victims for being greedy. He showed little remorse. He died in prison in April 2021 at age 82. He never paid back the missing money. Lesson 6. What this story really teaches. Madoff fits perfectly into the same pattern we have seen in every wild money story on this channel. From 1929 to LTCM to FTX to Wirecard to Theranos to Enron, the same dynamics repeat. First, exclusivity creates trust. Madoff turned away investors, which made the people he accepted feel chosen. Theranos refused due diligence. FTX gave preferential treatment to certain investors. Confidence and scarcity are the easiest illusions to manufacture. Second, institutional defenders ignore the warnings. The SEC was warned 5 times. They didn't act. The German regulator defended Wirecard. The smartest investors backed Theranos. Every major fraud has institutional protection that resists scrutiny. Third, too good to be true is always too good to be true. Madoff's returns were impossibly consistent. Theranos' technology was impossibly revolutionary. FTX growth was impossibly fast. When the numbers do not match how the world actually works, the explanation is almost never genius. Fourth, the victims pay the cost. Madoff went to prison, but most of the $65 billion was never recovered. Theranos patients received inaccurate medical results. Wirecard pensioners lost their retirements. Enron employees lost their 401ks. In every fraud, the executives walk away with something. The victims walk away with much less. Madoff's story ends the historical arc of these wild money stories. The pattern is unmistakable. The names change. The decades change. The financial instruments change. But the human psychology underneath is constant and devastating. Right now, somewhere in 2026, there is a Bernie Madoff operating in plain sight. There is a Markopolos trying to warn the world. There is an SEC equivalent that is too slow, too understaffed, or too dazzled to listen. The cycle has not ended. It has just put on new clothes. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Earnings Per Page. Next time, I'm not telling the story of another fraud. I'm telling the story of the only person in history who tried to corner the entire world's supply of silver and almost succeeded. The Hunt Brothers, 1980, the wildest commodity story ever recorded. Drop a comment with the fraud story you want covered next. See you in the next one.